Hello, and welcome to another Old Scams in Shiny New Packages podcast. On these podcasts, we use 20th century experiences and ideas to better understand 21st century scams, risks, and potential approaches. My name is John P. Rehberger, and I'm here with my podcasting collaborator, Don Wood. Hello, Don.
Hello, John.
As background for the listeners, we have a standard intro that we do at the beginning of these podcasts. They are not recorded ahead of time and copied. I read out a standard script. As a test, I cloned my own voice using a couple minutes of audio from these podcasts, and then I had the cloned voice read out the intro. And that's what you heard is my cloned voice from a free website read the introduction to this podcast. And I thought on balance it was pretty good, except I mispronounced my own last name. So I think that was kind of a giveaway, but I have a kind of a weird Germanic looking name. And so AI wasn't great doing that.
Oh, that's perfect, John. I heard that and thought to myself, have I been mispronouncing John's last name for the last 5,000 years? So I knew I wasn't. Oh, that's good. That's the first I'd heard it. I had no idea that wasn't you live.
Yeah. Point about doing all that is that I wanted to show how there's a rising risk. Most people, when they think of AI, they think of images and videos and things like that. AI also creates risks regarding voices. In the show notes is the website I went to clone my own voice, but it's relatively easy to clone somebody's voice. And that creates all kinds of risk because people may not actually be hearing what they think they're hearing anymore. And that's the point of that whole exercise. The other factor is that we are constantly surrounded by microphones nowadays. Some microphones we bring into our house voluntarily, such as our cell phones and an Alexa we may have in the house. Others, we've talked about in other podcasts, how nowadays almost all new cars have microphones. Mid-range to high-end TVs now have microphones. So there's constantly microphones all around us, and it's not that hard to get a recording of people's voice. So that creates risks, and so that's what I'd like to talk about today.
John, a newbie question. I assume you typed out the intro and fed it into this gizmo that already had samples of your voice, and then it just read it out.
Yes.
So you could have typed anything.
Yes.
Read it. Anything outrageous, anything embarrassing.
Yes.
Okay. Even maybe a different language.
Yeah, I did not try it with a different language, although it certainly is possible. It probably can fairly efficiently translate the text to a different language and then translate that language into my voice. I have not tried that, but it certainly seems possible.
And it would make travel a totally different story. I guess you do that in real time. You wouldn't have to worry about translation when you're on the move.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm currently trying to learn Spanish because I've traveled to Spanish-speaking countries recently. But if there was a real-time translation service, and Google Translate has something like that already, I'm just not sure how good it is and how much practice it takes. And plus, languages have quirks in them where you can accidentally insult or demean somebody and sort of do it naively because you don't understand the context. The word gay quickly comes to mind, how that's changed. In the Flintstones, when we were growing up, there used to be called this, there was a yabba dabba doo time, a dabba doo time, we'll have a gay old time. Well, that meaning has changed quite a bit in the subsequent decades.
That's right.
So I haven't tried it that much. I just wanted to demonstrate it for this purpose because we also have a dozen or so copies of me doing the intro in my own voice too. And the other thing is that this creates risks because now you almost always have to be careful what you say almost all the time. That is, you can be speaking into a microphone and not even know it. And that quickly gets into legal issues because in the state that we live in, it is what's called a one-party consent state in the United States. Some states are two-party consent and some states are one-party consent. That means only one party has to consent to a recording of a phone call or a conversation. So if we have a phone call and I consent to it, I can record it. And there's different pros and cons of that. Why is that an issue? Because if someone records your voice, they might be able to fairly easily feed it into this AI-based voice cloning system and have you saying a whole bunch of things that might be unfortunate or probably untrue.
Yeah, eventually they're just going to have to come up with a watermark or some kind of tell that this isn't real. I don't know how they're going to do it, if they'll do it. If it's impossible to watermark, then we won't be able to believe anything we hear.
And as compared to the 20th century, this was done in the past. I mean, there were impersonators. There were famous impersonators who could impersonate other people's voice. I don't know if you remember years ago when ringtones for phones were very popular, and you could buy an impersonation of somebody's voice giving your answering machine response. For example, you could have it in Richard Nixon's voice saying, "I am not a crook, but you can leave a message for John here." And you could buy that kind of stuff in the past. Same with in the old days, people used to quote, "wear a wire." That's what you see on TV. People, if you're trying to catch a narco bad guy or a mobster, you'd have an informant wear a wire to record everything. So you could always do it in the past. It's just now it just makes it a lot easier.
Everyone can do it.
Yeah, anybody can do it. Everybody can do it.
Yep.
And you're right. And that creates all kinds of problems. And it's a risk. It's a capability. It creates more fun maybe for some people, but it also creates a risk. The other one we talked about before in the preparation for this is this whole idea of AI generated music, where you don't have musicians anymore. You essentially have producers, and they have basically a fake person sing the song. And I can see how that's going to take off because it reduces the cost of creating music because you don't have to pay the singers. If you can write the song and get an AI bot to sing the song, and some of the AI bot songs I've heard are actually pretty catchy. I mean, I guess that's just me, I don't have good taste in music probably, but some of them are pretty good, and I think that's just going to happen.
Yeah, I was listening to something on Spotify. It just came up in my feed. And I thought, man, this is pretty good music. And I saved it, and I saved the album. And I became more and more interested in this band. And so I looked it up. And there was no web page. There was no explanation. There was only comments from people saying that this is probably an AI band because every album is exactly 60 minutes.
That's hilarious.
So
yeah.
I thought to myself, well, now do I like the band anymore now that I know the truth or suspect the truth? And I had a little puzzle, John, and I decided I think it's okay to like an AI band. If you like the music, who cares where it came from?
Yeah.
It's a little creepy.
It is a little creepy, but I don't know if you're familiar with this tool called Auto-Tune, where they put a person's voice through this computer system and it helps tune it up so they come in with perfect pitch. And they can do that in recordings. I think they're able to do that in live recordings in some situations, but not always. But anyway, I'm not a music expert. But so to me, it's just the extension of Auto-Tune. And I agree. If you like the music, you like the music, and kind of who cares how it's produced. The other thing, too, is this gets into things like dating and meeting. And suppose you meet somebody online, it makes it even more difficult to figure out whether you like their voice or not, because that may actually not be their voice. Or let's say you're hiring somebody who is going to be a customer contact person. You would almost have to meet that person in person to know that their voice or their presence or how they pronounce things was acceptable to you in your organization, because you don't want somebody who's meeting customers who, might offend them in some way that the person may not even have any control over. Or you may also have corporate standards for that type of thing in terms of how your image for your corporation, or I can think of like stewardesses or high-end salespeople. The corporation has basically a standard, and they want to come across as a certain way to maintain that certain image. And nowadays, you can't know that the voice you hear on a computer screen is the voice of that person. You know what I mean?
Well, it was just like your intro. That was the voice of you. But it could possibly be not the voice of you. And
Yes,
I wouldn't know.
exactly. I know.
Yeah. So it's just getting more complex. You can't believe what you see and only half of what you read, or something like that. And now it's pretty much you can't believe anything.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
You really got to ask yourself, just for a split second, how legitimate is this?
Yeah, I agree.
That's a little thought that I don't think we used to have. That's a little synapse connection that we now require before we can go forward, I think.
I agree. And I think ironically, it'll make face-to-face meeting more valuable, because it will delegitimize teleconference type of stuff, especially if a voice and an image is so easy to fake. If they want something authentic, they'll have to see the person in person, which is kind of funny, going back to like 20th century meeting in person versus meeting online.
Bring it on. Good thing for the human race. Yes.
I don't know. I'm kind of both. I kind of go both ways. It's just like the scammers and the fakers have kind of ruined the whole thing. You know what I mean? Because now you can't trust anything you hear on the internet or anything you see on the internet anymore, because it can be scammed or faked.
And everyone knows it. And I think that's part of the reason why, and we're recording this in May of 2026 for those in the future, but that is why when AI is mentioned at commencement addresses over the past 2 or 3 weeks, the speaker has been booed.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
This has happened in more than one campus.
Wow.
Yeah, the students are not liking it.
Well, maybe
Already it's come to the fore as something that's nefarious and dangerous and unpopular.
Well, the students not liking it because they think it's putting their careers and potential jobs at risk, or they just don't like it in general.
I'm guessing it's the first one,
Yeah.
because everything, ordinarily has a cause that's motivated by money and security. So that's what I think is probably it, because I imagine also they use AI every day for whatever it is they're doing.
Sure.
They don't like the idea of AI taking over the world.
Sure. Well, and they are the digital natives. They're the people who grew up with this digital technology around them all the time.
And I think it's fascinating because you and I remember when the internet first started happening, John, and there was hardly anybody speaking out opposed to it. It was
Sure.
totally optimistic, and
Yeah.
information would be free and political barriers would fall down and everybody would get together and we'd all be marching in happy lockstep to sunny uplands. People would be just thrilled with it.
Right.
There was no negative, there was no opposition. But now AI is hardly out of the gate and already the kids are putting thumbs down.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That is really fascinating. Yeah. I guess I'm not as threatened by that, but I can certainly see how some people might view themselves as being threatened by that. Getting back to the other part of this is microphones everywhere.
Right.
This is a legally nebulous area because a lot of companies will say they don't record telephone calls when you call them, but some have been busted, in fact, in doing so. I mean, Apple famously settled a lawsuit, I think it was last year, for Siri secretly recording private chats. And I don't think there are that many laws associated with this. I'm not as familiar with this area as other areas. I'm not a lawyer, but I am somewhat familiar with some areas. And the other thing is, sound files are typically smaller than video files. So they're easier to store, easier to move around. They use up less space. They can be recorded much more efficiently. And so it's got to be tempting for companies, if their corporate policy is ambiguous about it and the laws are ambiguous or not enforced, to record people's voices just in case and keep them stored somewhere just in case they become valuable in the future. Or, for example, they might be used as a form of authentication. For example, in the future, you can say, well, use your fingerprint to log in and say, I own a goat and the goat's name is Fred. And that will be a voice type of recognition, which is used in some ways, but AI may make all that less valuable over time anyway. So
Yeah, I think that's already happening, the voice print.
yeah.
There's a company that I deal with, and in order to get through to a live human, I have to say my name is my password or something like that. They have that, and then I get through. But you've just demonstrated with your intro that now that's not foolproof.
Right. Unless they have some type of technology for discerning it at a very high level, that they can discern your voice, or they have you speak complicated words that AI may have difficulty understanding or translating. And the famous metaphor for this in the AI visual world is hands. For some reason, AI has difficulty creating hands when it's doing images and pictures. And so maybe there'll be some kind of equivalent in the voice world of hands that is very difficult for AI to discern, like my last name, for example.
That's right. Yeah.
Everybody will have a complicated last name like mine instead of a simple one like
I'll
yours.
have to get rid of mine then. Yeah. One thing I think that we need to talk about the microphones being everywhere, because that is, of all the topics that we've talked about, I think maybe we've thrown around dystopia once or twice, but this sounds really like a kind of dystopia that those of a certain age could not imagine. That you almost have to assume when you're in a meeting at work or someone's house that there are microphones and recordings going on that you don't know about, and therefore you have to watch what you say.
I agree.
In some ways is okay because, mom and dad always said, keep a civil tongue in your head, mind your manners, speak nicely. And so that's not a bad thing. Nevertheless, there's something truly lost, I think, when there's the possibility of hidden mics 24/7 in one's life.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What do we do about that? Is there any advice to old people like you and me and others for whom this is pretty new? What do we do?
My suggestion is just know and understand the risks. You're not going to get rid of those microphones, especially if you go into somebody's house, but just be aware of the risks. To some degree, it comes to, for example, how much you trust the other person. And just know that if you don't trust the other person, there's a chance that the other person is recording what you're saying. In that case, you may want to have somebody accompany you. And that's exactly what I do with a friend of mine. An acquaintance of mine does not trust when she has to deal with another person in her life. So I accompany her as like, I don't want to say chaperone, but like as a neutral party whenever she has any conversations with this person, so that there's minimizes misunderstandings and the other person behaves a lot better. And we may all have to resort to something like that. Because if there is a recording later on, you're going to have somebody who said, no, she didn't say that. She said X instead of Y. But it really comes down to how much you trust the other person. Because if you trust the other person a lot, then I think you should be less suspicious in those situations, even if they do record something. That gets to relationships and things like that.
Exactly. And it brings back the human element. The human element now becomes even more important.
Sure.
As you were just saying earlier in the podcast, the face-to-face meeting is now something that is likely to be revived.
Yes.
I was thinking that one of the first houses that I lived in as a youngster in the 1960s was built in the 1950s, and it had a bomb shelter.
Mm-hmm.
They called it the bomb shelter, and it was kind of fun. It was mostly used just as storage, but it would be the bomb shelter. And this was during the height of the Cold War in the 50s and 60s. So now I'm thinking maybe every house needs a skiff.
For those listeners who don't know what a skiff is, it's called this secure compartmentalized information facility, which is basically a room where you can talk about secret stuff and it won't leak out electronically. And people who do top secret stuff, they have to go work in these skiffs. So that's what Don is talking about. Me?
When you invite someone to your house and they come over, you're going to have a dinner party. Everyone checks their phone at the door. They walk into the skiff. Now, I don't know how the skiff works, whether you have to pat people down.
No, yeah. It's a design, it's a room design. Actually, ironically, I met people in the area who build those for the government. So it's been a long time since I've been in a skiff, and I was only there for one meeting. But I'm familiar with them. It's a facility. There's a whole process for going into the skiff to know what you can and cannot do, and then there's stuff you can do in the skiff or not, and then you leave the skiff and you're out briefed as to what you can and cannot talk about outside the skiff. It's a very secure place for doing super secret stuff. But maybe you're right. Maybe rich people will want to have their own skiffs built in their house so they can trust the people they're talking to. Oh my God.
Well, the other one is again, back to the 60s, is you remember the show Get Smart?
Sure.
Don Adams and Barbara Feldon and the chief.
Sure.
They had the cone of silence. So when they were sitting at the desk and they had to speak about something very, very secretive and important and urgent, a cone would descend upon them. And so nobody outside the cone could hear what they were saying. The cone was transparent, so you could see mouths move. Uh-huh. Now, of course, because it's a comedy show, it was kind of funny, and the people were talking in this cone of silence about something ridiculous and silly. But it was sort of presaging the skiff, which is now, in my view, part of the architecture of the home of the future.
Well, maybe we'll have metaphorical cone of silence where we'll just say, okay, this conversation going forward will be done within a metaphorical cone of silence, and no one outside will hear these words, correct? Maybe some millennial or smart person will come up with that concept in the future and just use it metaphorically.
That might happen, but when you say no one will hear this, correct? ? Alexa might perk up and say, hello, I'm here.
Yes, I know. That's the downside of having all these microphones all around you, is you're not exactly sure how they're used and how they might be abused, because there is evidence of some of them being abused. But that's the world we live in now.
Yeah, how does that work? If Alexa's only supposed to respond if you say, hey, Alexa, what's the weather? But it must be listening 24/7 to wait for its voice. It's waiting for its name. I'm sorry. If it's waiting for its name to be heard, it's listening for its name to be said, and therefore it's listening all the time.
Yeah, I concur. Yeah. I concur with all these. That's why I don't have Siri or Hey Google on my phone, and we also do not have an Alexa in our house either, for that very reason, because I'm a little worried about that type of thing, because you're absolutely right. It makes sense that they are, in fact, listening all the time. They're just listening for the key word to enable their other function. And then it becomes an issue of, well, how much do you trust that organization? How much do you trust Amazon regarding Alexa? How much do you trust Apple regarding Siri? How much do you trust Google regarding Hey Google? And that becomes really tough really fast. And to be honest with you, when I've talked to other people about this issue, they don't even think about it. They implicitly trust Alexa. They just, as you have pointed out, they want the convenience.
Yes.
The convenience is first and foremost for them. The privacy issues are something they don't even consider at all.
But that's a conundrum because you've mentioned that you don't have Alexa, and nevertheless you send email.
Sure.
You use Gmail.
Sure.
And Gmail is it's not listening, but it's reading.
Sure.
It's reading your email, and you trust it to read your emails.
Yeah, I know.
Not tattle on you, but don't trust it to listen to you.
Yeah, I concur with your analysis, and I have to awkwardly agree that this is not internally consistent exactly. It's a comfort zone thing. I have been using email for decades now, and there's been no great catastrophe, and I don't have the same comfort with Alexas of the world. And that's just the truth. It's a comfort zone thing. They boiled my frog, as the metaphor is.
Yeah, that's good. I think my frog was alive about 15 years ago when I first thinking about getting a Chromebook.
Yeah.
And in those days, the Chromebook was new, and I talked to the guy who was selling it, and I mentioned to him that I was a little concerned because I knew that the Chromebook was being read by Google, especially the email. And in those days, ads would appear in the margins of one's email. I don't think one sees that anymore. And I just thought, man, I'm not doing this. I'm not getting a Google account and have my emails read. Well, 2 or 3 months later, there I am sitting at my desk with a newly bought Chromebook. Thinking about it.
Right, right.
The frog is half boiled at this point.
Right, right.
It's a half done frog.
Right.
It's medium. It was rare, now it's medium. Eventually it's going to be fully cooked. And
right.
It's a comfort zone thing. As you say, you pick your battles, and you've decided you're not going to battle with email or Gmail or any of the email services nowadays, all cloud-based.
Right.
Because that's just, it's the way of the world.
Yes, exactly. But I think it's good that maybe younger people are rethinking it and understand it, and maybe a little more critical to AI functions, especially if they're viewed as too intrusive or disruptive, to be honest with you.
And there could be at some point a singularity or a D-Day or an Armageddon where everybody's emails are somehow cracked and released to the world.
Yeah.
So it's all out there.
Everything
ever written, all out there. And at that point, people will either say, I don't care, or, okay, we need an alternative, and companies will come up with something. I'll just go back to paper.
Yeah, everybody will just laugh at how inane all my emails are, so I'm not that worried about it. So anyway, thank you, Don. Appreciate it. And I will end this podcast by saying, don't be afraid, because modern scams are just old scams in shiny new packages. Thank you, Don.
It's a pleasure, John. It's you, John, right?
Yes, it's me. It's really me.
Okay.
Bye.